Hey there, this chart reading is for Saturday, November 17th, 1973. Joliet, something like that, Illinois. And you don't know the time of birth, which is fine. You said probably afternoon or evening. So that's perfect. If you were born in the beginning of the day, you would have had moon in Leo. But since you said it's the latter part of the day, we're just going to go with this chart. Moon is in Virgo. So anyway. I do have to say that this will be just a little bit tentative just because the time of day does give me more information. So, like, there is stuff that I would be able to tell with the time, but since you don't have it, that's fine. I just don't know your ascendant, but that's okay. I can still tell a lot just from this information. So you have Sun in Scorpio and Moon in Virgo. And then other than that, your planets are pretty scattered. You have Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And if you don't understand what I'm saying or you don't understand the chart, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to go over it and then I'll explain more about what all this means. But yeah, your planets are actually kind of scattered throughout the chart. So Sun in Scorpio up here, Moon in Virgo, Venus is in Capricorn, Mars in Aries, Saturn in Cancer. North Node Sagittarius. I actually just brought this chart up, so I didn't really like prepare anything. But yeah, so you might know a little bit about your sun sign, but just in case you don't, you do have Sun in Scorpio. So Scorpio is known for being intense. They're known for being like manipulative and intense and like sexual, and all those things are kind of true, but like I think they're kind of exaggerated a little bit, if that makes sense. But there is definitely an intensity to Scorpio. They're kind of all or nothing. They want to just commit to something, and they can be a little bit obsessive. So I guess a lot of the hype is accurate. But again, like Scorpios are so known for being mysterious that like they're kind of, I think, everyone's favorite sign in a way in the astrology community, just because they're so like mysterious and weird and crazy. So I think there's kind of a hype to it. But anyway, Scorpio is a water sign, so they're very emotional, they're very passionate, they're very sensitive. But with Scorpio, the way I phrase it is like you're born in fall when like everything was kind of dying, and so it's almost kind of backward where you're starting your life and coming into the world at a time where the rest of the world around you is sort of dying, and it's almost like an ending. And so I think when people are born during times like that, they're more resilient. So Scorpio is very adaptable. It's very resilient. It's very much about being strong physically and emotionally. Like Scorpios are kind of always in a survival mode, if that makes sense. They're very emotional and they can feel out of control sometimes. And so sometimes they have the inclination to try to be controlling of their surroundings just because they feel out of control on the inside. Just because, like I said, they can be so emotional and so emotionally intense. And they're known to be manipulators. Again, it depends on the person. I do think that's a little bit overhyped, but there is sort of a manipulative side to them, and it just comes from their sensitivity. So that, like I said, they're so emotionally raw, and being emotional comes sort of vulnerabilities, and so a lot of times they will sort of like act lighter than they are, and what I mean by that is like, just act like, oh, everything's casual, and they're often mistaken for fire signs because they're so passionate, but then they present themselves as being kind of light and bubbly sometimes, or just light and carefree and easygoing, when in reality maybe that aspect of them is true, but it's sort of concealing a deeper part, which is very heavy and intense, and takes things very seriously, if that makes sense. So yeah, there is an intensity aspect to Scorpio. Let's see what else. I think I pretty much covered that, and just for the gist of it, you have Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. It's kind of funny because Mercury is retrograde right now, as I'm doing this chart reading. So what that means is Mercury appeared to be going backward when you were born, which is of course an illusion, but what it means is that like Mercury rules your mind and your style of learning and communication and analytical ability and thinking, stuff like that. So because it was retrograde, it's almost like you think backwards. So you can look at like I mean, everyone's different, so it could be mechanical for you, or it could be different. But like, if you're a mechanical person, you might look at a machine and just be able to see all the parts and see how they fit together and see how to take it apart in your mind. Or like, people with Mercury retrograde are really good at seeing what's going to happen next in movies, because they're just sort of intuitive and they see things in a different way than other people. They learn in a different way than other people, and they might have different opinions or a different perspective on things. So it makes for an interesting and creative person, someone who kind of thinks out of the box, and is sort of an individual thinker. So you think for yourself. Because, like I said, you have a different style of thinking than like what's normal. And sometimes I say people with Mercury retrograde might struggle in school just because of that. That's not always the case. You do have Moon in Virgo, so you'd probably be good at being analytical and taking in information. So that would probably make you better at school as a kid. And I could talk more about Moon in Virgo. So actually, kind of like the last chart I read, your Sun and Moon are in opposing elements. So the Sun is in water, your Moon is in Earth, and that actually kind of blends pretty nicely because your Sun sign is very emotional, and it could be very nurturing and very sympathetic and very feeling. But all those feelings and emotions can make it feel kind of ungrounded in a way. But you've got your Moon in Virgo, which is Earth, so it's very grounded. So maybe the more exterior layers of your personality are more emotional, but on the inside you have this inner core which is very grounded and practical and logical. So it's kind of a like a yin yang there. There's it's a complementary relationship, if that makes sense. Virgo moons are very practical. They what's the word, like they sort of are responsible with their emotions, so they don't put their emotions on other people, and that's a really nice quality for you. Like, where some Scorpios might be emotionally out of control or put their emotions on other people, you would sort of avoid that just because your Virgo moon wants to make sure you're taking responsibility. I guess it's very responsible, especially emotionally, because since you have Moon there, that's kind of your emotions and the inner core of your personality, your core identity, I guess. Virgo moons are very humble, very practical, analytical, modest, and when it's combined with the Scorpio Sun, it makes someone who's extremely adaptable, a quick learner, someone flexible, someone very observant and very sensitive. But you're very sensitive and very emotional, but also very logical and very mental or analytical, if that makes sense. So there's kind of a complementary energy there. You'd almost be like a good therapist because of that, where you are very empathetic, very sympathetic, very in touch with your emotions, but then also very analytical and are able to be also a little bit detached and be rational or analytical, or to make sense of very emotional situations. You'd also be very good just at solving problems in general. You probably have some kind of job. Like, I already know what job you have, but I'm trying to just read the chart. Like, I'm reading the chart as if I didn't know anything about you whatsoever. But if I didn't know anything about you whatsoever, I'd say you'd probably be really good at a job where you're fixing some kind of problem. And I know that sounds vague, but especially some kind of mental or health problem, or some kind of crisis situation, like I don't know, something where like people come to you with their problems. I keep thinking a therapist or almost like a paramedic would work too. Something where, again, it does help to be emotionally compassionate and empathetic, but also to be a little bit detached and to be able to think rationally and analyze maybe critical or very emotional situations. You'd be very good at that, and I think because of all that, you'd be really good at giving advice. Advice which is wise yet like practical, because the Scorpio is more like wise and it's more of that emotional wisdom. The Virgo is the more day-to-day practical wisdoms, and you have both, so that's really nice. What else? Very adaptable, very malleable. Like, you might be kind of stubborn at times, yet at the same time you're very flexible, like very adaptable. I know that might be kind of contradictory, but yeah, you're constantly, both Virgo and Scorpio are sort of constantly analyzing and assessing their surroundings and working to like to almost mold themselves to be perfect for their surroundings and molding their surroundings to be perfect for them. They're constantly adjusting things and adapting and strategizing and stuff like that. So and you could, both are sort of like humble signs, but the Scorpio has an ambition to it and a fire to it, and the Virgo can be very, I mean, these are both just different sides of your personality, so hopefully that's clear, but I'm kind of dissecting them as two separate things. But the Scorpio side of your personality is ambitious and has a fire to it, and is known for climbing up like corporate ladders and, you know, climbing the social rungs of society or whatever, getting those promotions and stuff like that. And then the Virgo moon is very dedicated and hardworking and stuff like that. So whatever job you have, you could be very successful at it because you're so, just like I said, you're so adaptable, and you could almost be a little bit like a chameleon of sorts, where you're just so resilient and adaptable, if that makes sense, and able to, maybe you could work at a low position for a long time, but it's only because you know it's part of the strategy that you have to get to a much better position later. You're always trying to improve things. Like, I could see you being really about self-help or self-improvement, or you know, because again, you're just good at taking like negative situations, or, you know, negative situations, and like just improving them. You're always improving things. Yeah, and that's just Virgo and Scorpio. Okay, what else? So that's kind of just the gist of your like the meat and potatoes of your personality. You've got Venus in Capricorn and Mars in Aries. Oh, and I want to say that like you'd probably be more self-aware than most Scorpios, because the Virgo moon, you could kind of see yourself in a detached way. So you'd probably be very self-analytical and very self-aware. Like the typical Scorpio could get lost in emotions and maybe not always be self-aware. So that's kind of a refreshing quality. Okay, so you've got Capricorn, Venus. So I actually really admire Venus and Capricorn. So Venus is kind of like your style of like romance and love and affection. It's sort of your approach to relationships, especially as a female. And because it's in Capricorn, Capricorn is a very dedicated sign. It's all about the long term. So in relationships, you're all about the long term. You're very dedicated, very committed. You want you're attracted to someone very responsible and someone practical, and, you know, someone who is going to be there for you. And that might sound vague, but like where other people might be attracted to more flashy personalities, you really just want someone consistent who's going to be there in the long run. And I always say about this placement that like their fantasy might be just about like growing old with someone, because that would be attractive and almost like sexy to them, just because they're so oriented toward the long run and they want something that's going to last. Yeah, and it's just really, I just find it admirable, because those people, their affection is just so long lasting and they're so dedicated that it's just a really admirable quality. You also have Mars in Aries, so so if you're attracted to men, the men you're attracted to would be very fiery and outgoing and sure of themselves and confident. And again, that might sound kind of vague, but it's not actually true for all people. For you, it's definitely a priority. You want someone who knows themselves and isn't afraid to be themselves. Someone who probably takes the initiative. Yeah, because you have Mars in Aries, you'd probably, I guess I'm just repeating myself, but you'd probably be attracted to someone who makes the first step in the relationship, I guess, or, you know, introduces themselves to you first, that type of thing. Definitely a leader and someone very self-sufficient and very independent. Like, you'd almost be attracted to like a CEO or something, like a business owner, someone who takes charge of their own life, or like has their own schedule or something, works for themselves type of thing. because Venus and Mars are like the planets of desire and relationships and romance and stuff like that, and they're in Capricorn and Aries, which are two very independent, um, sort of authoritative signs. So, yeah, you'd be attracted to someone very independent, very self-assured and confident, I guess. Okay, and I've covered most of everything. You have Jupiter in Aquarius, which is really nice. I actually kind of wish I had that. So you just kind of naturally accept like love from the community. That sounds kind of weird, but like you would just naturally, like, it would just help your interactions with just like strangers or with society in general. And anyone born the year you were born has that, so it's kind of a vague placement and it depends on the other planets in the chart. But people of your subgeneration would just sort of naturally fit into the world, if that makes sense. They just have luck in society, luck online too, with social media or being online. You'd be received well, I think. And yeah, and again, it's kind of vague just because that applies to anyone born within a year or two of when you were born. You have Saturn in Cancer. So Saturn represents like a lot of the more challenging aspects of our lives. Usually, wherever Saturn is, it indicates something that you have an extra hard time with when you're younger and struggle with a lot. But then as you get older and mature, you actually learn to thrive in that area. So yours is in Cancer and it's retrograde. So Cancer is the sign of the home and family and emotions. And so you would have difficulty with all those things at an early age. So you might never feel at home, or home might be a turbulent place, or just a place that's not comforting or nurturing, or maybe you'd have a hard time, like something where at a young age it helps us to have a sort of nurturing, sensitive place where we can be kind of vulnerable, I guess. You might not have that growing up, so, or something to do with your home life or emotions that would be very challenging at a young age. But as you get older, because of that experience, if you work through it, you would excel in that area. So you might be very sure of your emotions as you get older and very secure in that area. Or you might, once you're an adult, you might create a home life which is very secure and healthy and nurturing, which you didn't have when you were younger, that type of thing. And this is one of the harder placements for Saturn because it's in detriment there. So yeah, again, very difficult at a young age, but it would be rewarding later on somehow, and that's a little bit different for everybody. And then one last thing I'll cover is, well, I guess two things. So this is more generational, but you were born with Pluto and Libra, and for this generation, it was the first generation where there were a lot of a lot of parents starting to get divorced, and the divorce rate was going up. Pluto is a little bit like Saturn, where it indicates challenges and evolution, and it's some of the more difficult stuff, but it's necessary because it helps us evolve as individuals and as a species. And so because it's in Libra, which is in the sign of relationships and partnerships, people born during that time have a lot of evolution and I guess almost like strife to work through in that area, where your whole generation has this focus on relationships, and and again, that's kind of vague because it's your entire generation. It's not really personal to you per se, and in your chart it doesn't really aspect anything, so might not be that big a deal. But yeah, there's something to do with struggles with relationships or learning lessons in those areas. I know that's kind of vague, but again, it's kind of a vague placement just because it's generational. Okay, one last thing is you have North Node. Actually, that's really interesting. So North Node at 29 degrees Sagittarius, which is actually conjunct the galactic center. I think the galactic center is at 27 degrees Sagittarius, and I'll explain what that means. But and then you've got South Node exactly opposite that, so that would be 29 degrees Gemini. Okay, so people with South Node in Gemini, this I don't know if this is true for you, but a lot of people with South Node in Gemini like talk to themselves as a kid, just because your mind is so active and there's so much going on, and you'd be sort of a chameleon where you might be a people pleaser at a young age, where you fit into any social group. Like you would anticipate what they want from you, or that type of thing, and then sort of like mold yourself to fit it, if that makes sense. Um, and you'd be very intellectual. It'd make you a good learner and kind of detached and able to like learn quickly and assimilate information. And although you're good at all that stuff, you're good at assimilating information and maybe understanding people and people pleasing and stuff. All that's good, but if you linger in those areas too much, it can be bad for you. So, for example, obviously people pleasing can be sort of negative or difficult, just because if you're not being authentic or whatever, that could be not in your best interest in the long run. So to the solution to that is exactly opposite. So your North Node is in Sagittarius, which would suggest that as you mature, you'd get better at being more passionate, and I guess being more in touch with emotions rather than logic. So at a young age, being more mentally focused, but neglecting the emotional side or the passionate side. And as you get older, learning to focus more on, rather than just observing on the sidelines, actually learning from hands-on experience, if that makes sense. So so at a young age, you'd be more oriented toward maybe reading or looking at charts or something like that. The direction of your soul growth would be to, instead of doing that, like being good at that's great, and you can keep that and still utilize that. But as you get older, learn things by actually experiencing them, like hands-on, personally, with personal experiences. Like, so traveling would be really good for that. And it might be uncomfortable, but it's something that's good for your soul growth, I guess. So traveling, hands-on experiences, being more in touch with emotions rather than just focusing on the logical. But again, it kind of depends on the rest of your chart, because you have an emphasis on Scorpio. You might be more in touch with your emotions anyway. So hopefully that's not too contradictory. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Again, like I said, if I had the ascendant, or if I had the birth time, I would know a little bit more. But hopefully that resonates. Let me know what you think. Let me know what was accurate or what wasn't accurate. It's hard for me to tell, just because I'm just looking at the chart. I don't know anything about you really. So anyway, thanks for watching, and see you later.